moving on from that, let's talk about round 2. Let's talk about this pick 43 if they don't trade up. Who are some guys that you think are good fits in San Francisco that they could end up targeting with that 43rd pick?
Man, there's so many. I know we were talking before this episode about potential people like Javon Holland could be sitting there. I mean, this is a guy that some people, at the end of 2019 was saying this was going to be a top 10 pick type of guy. I mean, and now he's available in the early second round. I mean, when you look at Javon Holland, you've watched the film. He can play slot. He can play boundary corner. He can play man-on-man. He can play deep safety. He can play in the box safety. I mean, this kid can literally move anywhere. He's like 6'2", 200 pounds. He was the best DB in the Pac-12 in 2019. He ranked right behind Derek Stingley for the most valuable defensive back in the country. I feel like that's elite company if you're looking for an early second-round guy. You already mentioned the questions surrounding Richard Sherman. I mean, let's say one of those corners don't work out. You can slide Javon Holland in. Let's say a safety gets hurt or you're not confident in safety. You can slide Javon Holland back at safety. I think Javon Holland, if the 49ers can get him in the second round, might be even more valuable than whoever they get at number 3.
And that's something that would be really crazy. And he could be a guy you immediately plug and play. And I think right now, if you just look at the secondary, I'll just go through real fast. You have Kwaski Tart playing that strong safety spot, Jimmy Ward playing free safety. We talked about you have Jason Verrett, K'Wan Williams, and Emmanuel Mosley slated to be in all the 3 corner spots. But if you get Javon Holland and you kind of like, all right, dude, you're the big depth piece. I also think this applies the same for Elijah Molden. I feel the same way about him. Like they're similar mold, like they play a similar style, and they kind of play that Jimmy Ward role where they can play anywhere. You can put them in different situations. You can put them to man up. They're able to man up on guys. They're also to play single high. They have great ball skills. They're able to just go out there and be playmakers. So I like kind of going after one of those guys and saying, hey, like we don't really know what our secondary is going to look like a year from now, but we can find this guy. We can find out where he fits best, and then he can be that, not even as a rookie necessarily, but he can turn into whatever we want him to be come his second season. Because you look at the Niners secondary, and a lot of these guys aren't on long-term deals. They're all pretty short-term deals. I think Kwaski's on a 1-year deal, and K'Wan Williams on a 1-year deal, and same thing with Jason Verrett. So, like, these guys could definitely just be kind of slated, like almost like waiting, but they're getting mentored by a lot of veteran secondary players that have had a lot of success in the NFL. Also, they might not just like target a secondary guy in the second round. However, and I'm a big guy of drafting defensive line over drafting secondary players if the talent's there. I don't know if the talent's going to be there, and the 49ers have put a lot of capital and money into their defensive line, so I don't know what they're kind of thinking there. But I do expect them to take a guy in the secondary either day 2 or if they traded back into the first round. So I like the idea of a Javon Holland or an Elijah Molden. One other guy I wanted to bring up in the secondary is Eric Stokes. How do you think he could project there? Because when I'm watching him, I'm saying, all right, this guy could be an outside corner. Same thing we were kind of talking about J.C. Horn. He's a playmaker. He has great ball skills. He can be an outside corner. They ran a lot of press. I think that he could fit into that cover 3 press man bail, and also he can play man, but you can play him in cover 3 a lot, and you see the ball skills. I think that you can see him. You see all the highlight reel plays that he makes because I don't know, like I watch his highlight tape and I watched a couple games from him, but his highlight tape, like there's so many touchdowns that he's causing is pretty crazy. Of course, we're not judging these guys on highlight tapes, but I like him a lot. A very, very fast player. And so what do you think about his fit in San Francisco?
I think he's a lower ceiling type of safety that you're going to see. I mean, so he's going to be a consistent player. I feel like he's going to be that guy that you look back in like 10, 15 years. It's like, man, this dude played forever. He just never reached he want an all-pro safety, if that makes sense. I think his ceiling is a 10, 12-year starter who's just consistent, always he'll have those highlight plays because as you saw in his highlight tape, he has wide receiver hands for a defensive back. Those hands are so soft, and his ball skills are at a very high level. And the other thing that I don't think people look at him a lot. I know that Josh Pate for 247 hates this. He hates mock draft season because he said all these NFL guys invade college football towns and think they know everything. But if you look at where he comes from too, I mean, this kid started every year he was at Georgia. I don't know if all your listeners are up to date on SEC football. It's real hard to go in there and start at Georgia for multiple years. That shows you the level he plays at. He was Kirby Smart's right-hand man in the secondary. If you go back and watch Georgia games, he was in charge of making sure everybody in the secondary and even the linebackers and D-line knew what they were doing. He was the man with the plan, and he was the leader of that Georgia team. And you saw what heights they reached. They had a quarterback issue. That's a whole other thing, but that defense was probably going to have 9 draft picks from last year. But Eric Stokes was the guy they all looked to, and I think that's a quality I don't think you can teach in a player. They either have that leadership skill or don't. And so if I told you without a name, you're going to get a playmaker, a guy who can, when he gets his hands on the ball, will make plays, and he's an excellent leader, you would be like, give me that dude 10 times out of 10, especially in the second round.
You're selling me on Eric Stokes because what we've seen a lot with the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch regime is that they are big on high character guys. And I mean, we've seen them reach a couple times just to get some high character guys over some other players, which I'm not going to critique them for that either, because I think that's something that a lot of organizations they don't really think is an important thing. But you start putting a lot of high level guys in a locker room, and you're building a very good culture. Also, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, their drafting strategy has been, hey, we like these guys that come from big programs. And they'll take guys that weren't, high talent, but they played in the SEC their whole career, and they can project to be like a depth piece, but they were starting in the SEC. Like, they want those guys from big programs a lot of times. And then, of course, they're going to mix that up with some more athletic players. But a lot of their picks have been high-level dudes from the SEC, from Power 5 football, and guys that are playing for good programs. If Eric Stokes is this leader that you feel like he is, I think that's a huge chance that they take him in the second round. And you were talking about him potentially being a safety. When I'm watching him a lot, he's playing a lot of outside corner. Is he another one of those guys that you can kind of play different in some different spots?
When he first got to Georgia, he was moved around all around the secondary. So he has experience everywhere. So just when I look at the 49ers roster, I feel like they want to try to see what they can get from Mosley and Verrett on the outside. And, they already got their slot guy figured out. So why not just see if we stick them, I think wherever you have a hole as the 49ers, you can stick Stokes for 1 year, see what he can do, and then as you learn more about him, he'll find his niche. So you might not see immediate production from Stokes, but in terms of how I think about the NFL draft, first-round guys and the first half of the second round, you want to be instant starters. Anything after that, if they develop in 2-3 years, you nailed it. That's all you need. You don't need the future Hall of Famers in the third, late second rounds. You just want to get someone who can play, someone who's not going to cost your team the game, and that's what you're going to get with Stokes. And I think it'll take a year or two to kind of figure out where he fits in the scheme, because I also don't know what the defensive scheme is going to look like for the 49ers, losing their defensive coordinator. I'm really not up to date on what the defensive scheme is going to be, but I think Stokes can fit wherever this new defensive coordinator wants to put him.
Yeah, so just real quick on that, I mean, what I kind of project them to do is last season or seasons prior when they had Richard Sherman there, I don't know if he's going to be back. I'd expect him not to be back, but it's a lot of cover 3. It's a pretty heavy zone coverage concept. And then last season when Sherman went down and they had Akella Witherspoon, who's now at the Seahawks, and Jason Verrett out there, Emmanuel Mosley, you started to see them shift in a little bit more of man, using some cover 2, and really kind of becoming a more versatile defense. And so I kind of think they're shifting a little bit away from that almost strict cover 3. But I don't really know how it's going to look. I think it should look pretty similar. Their new defensive coordinators, D'Amico Ryans, who was their linebacker coach, who Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner are his 2 case studies. So that's a good sign right there.
Yes, that's a perfect sign. Fred Warner's a monster.
Yeah, so that's exciting. But I like this Eric Stokes idea. But offensive line, one guy I've kind of looked into potentially getting is Creed Humphrey. I don't know if he'll make it to 43. And for Yeah, and that's with a lot of guys. But also, he could be a guy you trade back into the first for. Like there's so many like things you can do. And I think a lot of people are if you haven't really thought about the Niners trading up into the first, you go, oh, they just traded all that to move up to 3. The thing is, they have like extra third round picks from Saul leaving, and so you have 3 fifths, and you have stuff like that. Also, they're building a mostly veteran roster, so there's not a lot of like starting spots. And there's not a lot of room for these late round pieces to fit. So they're going to be willing to part with extra later round picks to move up and get a guy that they love. And we've seen them do that a lot in the past. So I think there's a big chance. But Creed Humphrey, he could start, I think, at right guard for them and then eventually move to center to replace Alex Mack. And what a better guy to mentor him for that system. Even if he didn't start for the whole first year and was just a backup center, I still think that there's reason for them to even take him in the late first. Because his size, he's 6'4", 312. You don't have these dudes that are 350 playing in Kyle's system because you got to be able to move. And Creed's a guy that can move. So I kind of think this is that could also be a route that they go.
Yeah, and he stays healthy. That's the thing. I don't think a lot of people staying healthy is half the fight for an offensive lineman. Once you get with those high weights, though, people always say, "Oh, running backs are so fragile, the career life." Man, offensive line, you get beat down during the season if you can't stay healthy. We've seen so many amazing offensive linemen not stay healthy and just have their career ruined. I mean, Quentin Nelson's arguably one of the best offensive linemen in the NFL. Have you ever heard about him getting hurt? Half the fight is just availability. So I think Creed Humphrey is great. Like you said, he played at a big university. He played against some talented defensive linemen. He allowed 0 sacks in 3 years at Oklahoma. That's what else do you want, guys? Their one job is not to give up sacks, and he didn't do it from the center spot.
That's remarkable, and that's important too, because I don't know how much you know about like Kyle's system, but the center is crucial to that success in the run game and also the pass game, because the center is a guy that's really like calling all of the pass cover like blocking like concepts, I guess. And he's the leader of that line, and also what a good spot for him, because he's not going to have the pressure to come in there and immediately, all right, you got to immediately deliver. No, there's Alex Mack there, former All-Pro, that's going to mentor you, and that's already been in Kyle's system on 2 different teams. So I like that fit. I would be totally cool with them going and get the offensive lineman. Not a flashy pick, but definitely an option. And we're not going to really talk about much of some edge guys, but real quick, like who would be a couple names just to kind of think about in that range?
Man, every year I think everyone has that prospect that they just fall in love with, and it's like, I promise you, I don't care what his grade is, this guy's going to be a star. Carlos Boogie Basham, Wake Forest. I know the school. You're like, who watched a Wake Forest game this year? I bet no one listening to the podcast watched Wake Forest. This kid dominated the Senior Bowl, man. I'm talking about dominated those first round NFL offensive linemen that you're talking about, those second round guys. This is a guy that had over 20 sacks in his career. He's 6'5", 285, but he runs so fast. I mean, there's film, if you go watch his highlights, where he'll have an inside move, and he just does it so agile, so fast that the offensive lineman doesn't even touch him. He's a specialty pass rusher. He's big enough to play on the inside if you want. And that's a mismatch. He's so fast that those inside offensive linemen don't know what's coming. And he's powerful and physical enough on the outside. His one negative, the thing that made him drop to this late second round spot, is he never came off the field. Wake Forest didn't have enough depth to ever get him a break. So the down-to-down consistency was his biggest weakness. With the 49ers, though, he's not going to have to play down-to-down. Defensive line's so stacked. If you can get a fresh Boogie Basham in there on pass rushing plays with Bosa, with Armstead, with all those guys y'all have, I'm talking about quarterbacks are going to have nightmares. And with some of the horrible offensive lines we see in the NFC West, I mean, no offense to Seattle or Arizona either. I mean, Basham, Bosa, Armstead will eat. And Basham is the perfect late round pick because he's not going to have to start immediately. He can learn, but he's talented, physical enough, and has the size where he's going to be deadly. And I'm telling you, this would be an amazing pick for the 49ers.
Okay, yeah, no, you're not going to find a guy that's more into building the defensive line, because I saw them build up that defensive line and kind of put some other things on the back burner, and then all of a sudden, boom, this defensive line was absolutely dominant, and that was one of the most dominant defenses I've ever watched for a full season in 2019 because you have a second wave of guys that are starting level players. And if you have him out there coming in the second wave, if he's just come as a rookie, he might just come in to spell Bosa and not really play that much. And that's crucial if you can have a guy like that coming in and giving quality pass rushes and just being an overall really talented player. I love that idea as well. Also, not going to get into the receivers today, but there's a bunch of names: Rashad Bateman, Rondell Moore, Elijah Moore, Terrence Marshall, Kadarius Toney, Dwayne Eskridge. There's so many names. I'm going to get into those guys later on in the offseason, but that's going to do it for talking about round 2.